Welcome to the Painting of the Week podcast, where we look at some of the most significant paintings throughout history. Introducing your hosts, Phil Grabsky and Laura Bentham.
Welcome to this week's Painting of the Week. Welcome back. Got a fascinating painting that Laura and I are going to talk about today. If you go to the website seventh-art.com, so seventh-art.com, and click on podcast, then the painting will come up. And it's a painting called The Haywain by Hieronymus Bosch. We made a film about Hieronymus Bosch on his 500th anniversary of his death. So we must have made that in 2016. And we'll talk about that during the podcast. But he is an utterly extraordinary painter. And to the best of our knowledge, because Laura was just reminding me that he doesn't date his paintings, so often you have to use kind of research to work out when a painting was done. And often that means taking testing the frame, testing the wood on which the painting is done to get a sense of the if not the year, then certainly close to the year. Anyway, this would appear to be one of his late works, and maybe even in the year 1516 itself. It's fantastic, this painting, isn't it?
I am pleased I've got strong coffee. I mean...
What, before you...
With everything... Okay, so I didn't really know Bosch until I think... Well, we've discussed him before. And over the last few years of podcasting, I've looked at his work. But obviously now this week, we're like, okay, Bosch. Oh...
Bosch.
It's a different level. In actual fact, I've been quite nervous to walk around the streets hoping that everything I was doing was not leading me to hell.
Oh, I know.
Because it is...
It looks miserable.
It does. I mean, the only thing about it is it's hot. That's the only thing that's got anything going for it. But he's taken imagination to another level of... I've got so many questions to ask you about these paintings, and just I can't believe what I was looking at. I was just like, you can't just say, I'm going to a Bosch exhibition, I'll whiz round and meet you in the cafe in an hour.
Well...
That's not going to happen, is it?
Let's talk about that exhibition. So it was in 2016.
Amazing.
It was in his hometown of
okay.
Schiergenbosch in the Netherlands. And it's really interesting because they don't have a strong permanent collection, in the sense that they don't. It's not one of those galleries that has lots of Rembrandts and Vermeers and Goyas. So when they try to put on a big exhibition, what can they trade with? What can they say to the National Gallery in Washington or some Japanese gallery? Well, if you lend us your Bosch in future, we can lend you such and such. Well, they couldn't do that.
No.
But they wanted to do something significant for the 500th anniversary. But what they traded was knowledge. Really interesting. So there's only about 20 odd paintings that still exist. And I think, not that anyway, maybe a little bit more. But they got something like 20 of the paintings, 19 of the extant drawings. And basically, I'm guessing somewhat here, but that may be like 80% of any Bosch work that survived. So it's quite extraordinary. It's up there with the recent Vermeer where they got, 27 of the 35. And they did it by saying, listen, send us your Bosch. We are the world experts on conservation, exploration. We will analyse the painting, we'll clean the painting. If it needs restretching, or if the canvas needs any work, or if the frame or the back of the frame needs any work, we'll do all that for you. Particularly the cleaning was a big deal.
Oh, I think that's lovely.
So they were getting Bosches from all around the world,
yeah,
which was amazing. And when we walked into the exhibition, and it's a relatively small town in the Netherlands, and in a sense most notable for having this museum and being the birthplace of Hieronymus Bosch. Oh my God, you'd have thought these paintings had been painted yesterday.
Right.
They were so bright and in such perfect condition. It was quite something. So
the galleries got into it then, And also, don't you think the romance of that you would have thought that all those paintings coming together in that one place, in his birthplace, because he's just so fascinating.
We've now done 38, almost 39 exhibitions on screen. And this is up there with the Vermeer exhibition as genuinely a once in a lifetime, or a once ever.
Yeah.
And I think it's true of any of the films that we make. I always say, if you can see the paintings like the Van Gogh Poets and Lovers, we've made a really good film. And in some ways, the film has more context, more close-ups. You're not being pushed around by the crowds of people. But if you can go and see the exhibition, look at the paintings for yourself, you should. But this exhibition was one where seeing them together was really quite something. Now, what of course is important to bear in mind is that we were then looking at them in 2016. You've got to look quite hard at the time in which the period in which he painted them, and understand the period and understand what he's coming from, what he's trying to do. And we'll talk about that in a second. Just one thing on that exhibition. So we had moved quite quickly on this. My friend and colleague David and I had been at the opening of an exhibition at the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam, where we met the person in charge of marketing for this museum, who told us about this show, which was going to open in November. And one of the advantages of being self-funded and not having to go through the gatekeepers that are broadcasters, who can take years to say no and even longer to say yes, is in that moment, I said to her, we'll do it.
Right, okay, amazing.
And she said, fabulous. And we said, fabulous. And come November, we're planning the shoot. But as we got closer and closer to the shoot, she kept sending emails saying, it is so popular.
Oh, right. Okay.
Because we weren't filming on the opening night. We were filming 2-3 weeks in. She said, it's so popular, we've decided to extend the opening hours to 7 p.m. So you'll have to start at 7:30. Okay. Another email. Actually, it's so popular, we're going to have to ask you to come in at 9. Then it was... Basically, when we actually got there, we had to film from 1 a.m. to 8 a.m.
Right.
Because they were open till midnight. It was so popular. People were travelling from throughout Europe. And when I talk to broadcasters who tell me no one's interested in art, why should we make films about art, blah-de-blah-de-blah. Oh, my word, it's such rubbish. And I know you've just been to see the Van Gogh Poets and Lovers exhibition.
Wow.
Absolutely rammed.
You couldn't move.
But, if I tried to get that on the BBC, they'll say, oh, well,
But that's that you've made such a good point. But also, that you said that you've made your film. I haven't seen it, Phil, which I probably should have done. Everyone went, well, have you seen it? Oh, well, been cleaning my house or something like that, or doing something else. But you see these paintings, going to that Van Gogh exhibition the other day. I walked around it. It was amazing. But it was rammed. It was, I couldn't move. And all you want to do is when you come out is think, I'd love to see now something which is going to give me all the information I need. Super. I've seen some paintings that I loved that are my favourites, but I know I miss things. I can sit at home, have a nice cup of tea, piece of cake, and fill in all the gaps that I didn't get, and look at that museum when it was empty.
It's interesting.
I can't wait.
We did do a preview screening 2-3 days ago, and somebody said, what's the best way? Should I go to the show first and then see the film, or see the film and then the show? And I said, well, I guess in an ideal world, you'd see the film, then the show, then the film again, because then you're seeing it twice.
Yeah.
But in some ways, seeing the show first and having the artworks presented to you as the curators would hope. Although I must say, I think that, when there's big crowds, you maybe can miss some of the captions, you can maybe miss what the narrative is. And this is, on the surface level, you have a 6 rooms full of masterpieces.
Yeah.
But there is a very definite curatorial line that the two curators are trying to draw you through, and which means there's not too much about his life before, and there's not too much about his life after. It's just about these 2 years and 3 months, or whatever it is, when he's in the south. I think some people will come out of the exhibition having not quite grasped even why it's called Poets and Lovers. They should.
I think I 100% agree with you. But also something you can't get there. I mean, now I will never go to and see this Bosch exhibition. It's too late. I didn't know about it. And I can't tell you how much I love his paintings. And I've been speaking about all week
film.
is Bosch. I just can't get over the paintings and what he did at the time. So to watch a film, to watch a documentary, to go to a cinema and they do have nice cups of tea and pieces of cake, because all the cinemas you pick are all those kind of really cool ones. So yeah, I need to do it.
Well, okay, so let's talk about Bosch.
Let's go.
So
let's
there
try.
there are a number of painters in the 16th century who are really driving things in a new direction. So first of all, it's what's known as a triptych. I'm sure most people listening to this will know what that means, but it's basically, if you look at the artwork, you'll see there are actually 3 paintings, and the 2 side panels which will close, and on the front of those there is another painting. And this would often be in a church, sometimes in a domestic setting. From 1570, this is owned by Philip II.
Right.
And I assume that would be at the Escurial, his huge, wonderfully impressive, at least, palace north of Madrid. And I think the panels were somewhere else. Eventually, it's all brought back together at the Prado, one of the world's great galleries, of course. So the painting would be closed. And for those of you who know another Bosch painting called Garden of Earthly Delights, you've got the same thing. The panels are normally shut, but then when you open it up, you have both the central panel and then the 2 side panels. Now, the side panels don't necessarily or automatically refer to the central panel, and it's not necessarily a journey from the left to the middle to the right. This one is.
Yeah.
So you basically have a journey to hell. Hell's on the right. Now, the whole concept of heaven and hell is clearly essential to understanding life at this time. I mean, the other day I was out and there was a huge red moon in the sky. I mean, even if it's a normal white moon or just the sun, I mean, how confusing must that have been?
Yeah.
Before you had any sense, before you just wouldn't understand these things. So religion fills the gaps. So the church, to some extent, takes advantage of that, and they say, if you misbehave, if you don't follow the rules as we have set them down, then you are going to hell. And it's for eternity, and it's extraordinarily unpleasant. This is great fun for artists. I mean, Bosch's imagination is extraordinary, and people are still influenced by him to this day. He's painting 500 and something years ago, but people still, look to him for inspiration. But as an artist where, up to this point, you're painting portraits of nobles, maybe you get a religious commission to do Jesus on the cross or something. Well, hold on a minute. Now you have, the ability to paint hell, and you can just go to town. And if you look at this, the fires and it's horrible to watch and to look at. But that's where you're heading on the right-hand side. The central panel, of course, is the Haywain. Yeah,
why we've gone to hell.
And if you look closely, all those characters are kind of, it's very cleverly done. They're all kind of leaning, they're all on that, they're all basically all, there's a momentum from left to right, which is basically, he's saying through the way he's painted it, this is where they're all going. And if you look closely, they're all up to nefarious activities, which are sins. Christ, almost unnoticed, is in the cloud, and he's saying, hold on a minute, I've told you how to behave. And everyone's ignoring him. There's an angel looking up.
She's the only one, I believe.
But
I think the rest...
Nobody else is paying any attention. And, the hay, clearly, life revolved around food. You need hay for your animals to get them through the winter, But people are stealing it. People have got their hands in it,
Well, it's a bit of a funny thing, isn't it? Because they could have shared it.
Yeah.
Because it would have gone rotten in a period of time. But instead, I mean, it's such a funny picture that they're all fighting like mad over it. But even the people that are in their little tiny scenes have all somehow got a tiny little piece of it somewhere.
Yeah.
I think a doctor is trying to do something on someone's mouth, and just at the bottom there, and he's obviously stolen it from the patient, and things like that. I mean, it is. I don't know.
They are basically all
for hours, Phil.
They're all up to no good. And one of the things about Bosch is you can just, I think it's great with a camera because we can show you all the details, but you just have to look at this painting in detail. It is beautifully painted.
It's unbelievable.
Even the background, don't ignore the background, which is that Leonardo thing of painting it in blue, because blue recedes into the background, red comes out to the foreground. So from just a painterly point of view, it's exquisite. And it's not unique. There are other painters starting to do this kind of thing, but what's so interesting is, to some extent, what Bosch is doing is he's presenting you, in a way, daily life. Now, not entirely, but again, if you think where we've come from, Leonardo doesn't do paintings like this, Raphael doesn't do paintings like this, Michelangelo doesn't do paintings like this. They are doing single women, single men, biblical stories, and that's only, they're painting more or less the same time. There is something about being in the Netherlands where they're a little bit less inclined, particularly, this whole divide between Protestant and Catholic. Although Bosch is, his part of the Netherlands is in the Catholic southern area, but still, it's kind of reflecting. If you look at his other paintings, there's a reflection of, there's a brothel.
Yeah.
I can't imagine Raphael painting a brothel, or Leonardo, or even Michelangelo.
But did it actually work, do you think, Phil? I mean, what were the figures like for people going to church? Were you actually terrified every day of... I mean, Bosch, I feel a bit... He must have been... Was he really perfect, sort of morally above everybody else?
Well, the thing is...
Then he thinks, OK, guys, you've got to get yourself under control here.
So one of the problems with making a film about Bosch is that there's no paper. There's no paperwork.
I couldn't find anything.
So there's nothing. We know a little bit, about his history, and he does seem to have been a moralizer.
Right.
We don't always know who's commissioned the artworks. We don't always know where the artworks were intended to be seen. Who's commissioned this, and who's going to look at it is always, a key element.
Yeah.
Is this for a church? Possibly, or is it for a private collection? Well, that will vary from painting to painting. I doubt, but it's plausible. Of course, he would have done some paintings a bit like Vermeer on the chart, hoping to then sell them.
Right.
I think he was probably just, there's so much humour and storytelling and horror in his paintings, and yet somehow my impression of him through the making of the film was that he was probably slightly dour, actually. In my mind, I had in mind a maths teacher that I used to have who had a little moustache and was, but every so often there'd be a crack of humour that would come through.
Right.
Not that often, but occasionally.
Okay, on a good day.
I remember him once saying to me, Grabsky, if you remember one thing, remember X is a cross. And I thought, what? And then I realised that on the graphs, Y is the vertical line and X is the horizontal line. And I just thought, that's actually quite funny.
Yeah.
X is... But that's the only...
And you never forgot it.
I never forgot it.
So exactly. So with Bosch's paintings, you're not going to forget them, are you?
You're definitely not going to forget them.
You're definitely... Everything about them is crazy. And those sort of grotesque the figures, the hell ones, where they've got those demons and things.
Well, if you look at some of them... This actually, you can kind of work out what's going on. When you look at Garden of Earthly Delights, his imagination is...
I think that might have been my favourite one, actually.
If a man's on drugs... he wasn't on drugs, I'm not suggesting that, but
I read about that, though, that because because they didn't know where he got all his sort of his imagination from, that there was this thing about back in those times they may have eaten ergots.
Ergots?
Yeah, which is like a fungus that comes from rye crops. And it can give you lots of symptoms, sores, convulsions, burning sensation in the limbs, and very overpowering hallucinations. And they were around in those times. I mean, when you wake up in the morning, when you get to hell part of his paintings especially, there must have been something, I'm not sure. I know there was some, apparently in the Bibles at the time, or some of the medieval Christianity thing, there was some of these figures in the columns and things, some of them.
Maybe. But I mean, you look on the right-hand side of this central panel, and the man with the fish head.
Oh, it's
and
mad.
I mean, all those characters there, and animals, and I mean, it's just like
they are actually. They are quite. It's very inspiring, actually. I mean, it didn't make me feel necessarily nervous, but I'm not living in those times. I must admit, as paintings and drawings, they are. If you were going to do a costume for something ridiculous, Halloween or something.
Oh yeah, goes a character from Bosch.
Wouldn't you?
That's a good idea. We keep meaning to have we were going to have a 40th anniversary of Seventh Art where you had to come as a character that we'd made a film about.
That'd be brilliant.
But actually we could expand that as a character from one of the paintings.
Exactly. It would be perfect.
There's another interesting thing that comes up in the film was that it was one of those films where we chose to use period music. Mm. It's very beautiful actually, but it's polyphonic. Which means there's kind of multiple layers going on. And we spoke to the one of the members of the group in Bosch, and they played for us in the cathedral there. And he said he actually makes a connection between the music that they would listen to in a cathedral, in a religious environment, and the way he paints. Because you have these interweaving. I mean, this is a rather clear narrative line. Some of the other paintings, there are maybe multiple narrative lines going on. But again, just that sense of, it doesn't have to be one story. No. It could be multiple things happening all at the same time and all bumping into one another, which at times might resolve and at other times might not. Again, on top of the Haywain there, you've got the musicians playing. So maybe that's actually reflecting a certain, someone might be able to look at it and see what the notes are. Certainly it would give you the sense that there's music being played. It's just adding to the cacophony of the whole thing. And I mean, one of the artists who follows on, 50, 60 years later is Bruegel. Yeah. And we have a project planned, we're in pre-production actually, about Bruegel. And again, this whole thing of starting to look at what's around you, daily life. Mm. And it might be in parables, it might not be, it might still be narrative storytelling going on there.
I did look at that because they were saying how influenced he was. Because obviously Bosch, his paintings are, these people must have lived in fear all the time. You looked at these, especially at the time they were living, because every day was a fear of death, wouldn't it? They all died quite young, and
I think mid-30s exactly. if you were lucky.
Yeah. So to see that on the wall as to where you're going, if you've messed up, and they must have been poor. So imagine you may have stolen some food or something, just a couple of something silly like that, and this is what you're seeing as the outcome.
In church, you're going to see visions of hell.
But the Bruegel paintings, they're actually quite fun. There's lots of really sort of sweet pictures.
Yeah.
And of the everyday life.
I mean, there's lots to them. There's lots to read into them, which we'll be talking about in the film. They were having their own climate change, and that's reflected in. I mean, again, there is that sense of, in Bruegel's in particular, the seasons. And the seasons are so relevant because of the production of food.
Okay, yeah.
As mentioned before, I did read somewhere, and I do believe it. something like 90 to 95% of the world's population until about 200 years ago was engaged in the daily production of food.
Right.
So again, when I filmed in Afghanistan, you can see it to this day that you're living in a cave, you're living in a pretty rustic home, and your first priority is water. So you don't have running water, so you've got to go to a nearby stream. You need a container to carry it in. You need to bring it back. You need some kindling and some wood to create a fire. You need a pot, and that's just to get hot water.
Yeah.
Then if you've got some tea, you've got a drink. And then alongside that, you've got the production of bread. And either you rely on purchasing flour from somebody else or bread from the baker, in which case you've got to be generating income somehow, or you have your own little field. So the family I was filming, they were very poor, so they had the worst field on the side of a hill. No one else wanted it. It was on a slope. It was rocky. You've got to clear the rocks, and they borrowed some donkeys, and that's going to be they're going to have to pay that favour back.
Yeah.
With a plough, borrowed that, pay that favour back. Got to get the grain, paid for it. Have they earned the money? Then they have to hope it grows. They're subject to climate change, so. Just before the Taliban was kicked out in 2001, they had 4 years of drought. But then if your grain grows, you then take it to the miller. And the mill that I went to was like an old-style water mill. It probably hadn't changed for hundreds or thousands of years. The miller takes 10%. Then you get a bag of flour at this point in the year, which you have to then make last for a long time. And then you need a fire pit, and again you need wood, and wood's in short supply. Blah blah blah. And then that's just bread and tea.
Yeah. So that's the thing, when you start to look at these paintings,
it's
that's their everyday life.
So you can imagine.
I don't even know how they got paint.
Well,
it's crazy.
Well,
but
it's Bosch is a nice town.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
But back then, like you say,
he's okay, but these poor people.
Yeah.
So this is like us being starving, and an open top Tesco or Sainsbury's van goes past full of food. Well, I mean, you're gonna have a little.
Have a little. Well, they are, aren't they?
But I mean, if you don't eat, you basically
yeah.
starve, or you start stealing. And you can see these people. They're like people are garrotting other people. People are selling themselves sexually. People are. I mean, all sorts of things going on here.
Even the nuns at the bottom.
Even the nuns.
Yeah.
But there you have the bottom right. Big fat monk. Or was that a big fat nun?
Oh, I think it's a nun actually.
You know,
I don't know. Yes.
It could be.
And she's I mean, it's.
So this is the church probably. I mean, well, Hieronymus Bosch wouldn't be criticising the church. That would be a little risky. But he's certainly, there's a lot of hay being delivered to the nice chubby monk or nun there, isn't there? So he's making a point.
Well, I suppose maybe even if they give in to sin, then,
Well, that would be his point, that nobody's above sin.
No.
And
it is extraordinary.
And they, left hand side, you got Adam and Eve, and nice and thin, and they got the apple to eat.
Yeah, it is unbelievable. There wasn't hardly any. I only saw that there was only one drawing of Bosch, no real pictures of him at all.
Yeah.
But in the Garden of Earthly Delights, he's a tree man, isn't there?
Mm.
And they think that might be him. Did you find that out at all when you were doing the film?
Yeah. I mean,
were both his paintings there? This one
no.
and
well, actually, from memory, I don't think the Garden of Earthly Delights travelled from the Prado.
Okay.
So that wasn't there. No.
But this one, yes.
But there were plenty of others. I mean, it's a very beautiful film, just because the paintings are so extraordinary.
Well, yeah.
And actually, the catalogue, unusually for us, we kind of quoted from the catalogue because it was written in a very evocative, almost poetic way. It was I'm glad we made it. It wasn't. I mean, it's one of those difficulties for us as filmmakers that. Excuse me, if people don't know Bosch, will they go to the cinema to see the film? So it didn't do as well as we would have liked, but it's a record.
But it also could now. I mean, you might sort of make a comeback because his paintings are just.
When was he? I know. When was he born?
I've got them down as 1425 or 1430, roughly around that time.
All right, so we could have an anniversary film at any time now. We'll just decide.
Yeah.
Well, 1425.
Of course.
600th anniversary.
That was it.
I'm gonna make a note.
Yeah, no, absolutely, because so little was known. I mean, like you said, he could afford paints and stuff like that, but you don't know why he could afford paints.
Well, I mean, if you look, when you see the location footage and you see the town was pretty wealthy. He lived in the main square, as far as I remember. Right. I think he was doing well. He was in a lodge, so he was doing okay for himself. I think
it's really lovely that the people of that town actually then all those paintings came back and the exhibition was there. I think that's really lovely.
Oh, it was probably
those people must have loved that.
That year of Bosch, the whole town was kind of put across to him. It's a wonderful place.
That's great.
It is a wonderful gallery and town to visit. Actually, the Netherlands and Belgium are two countries that I think Britons maybe overlook a little bit as far as going on. Maybe people go to Amsterdam or to Brussels, but if you go to places like Ghent, there's so many other places to go to. They're really fantastic.
Yeah.
They're great countries, and they artistically there's so much culture there.
Well, I'm totally fascinated now by Dutch painters, and I definitely didn't know anything about them particularly at all. I just love so much the details on these paintings.
Yeah, it's definitely one to have a good look at. So, certainly encourage people to watch our exhibition on screen film we made about Bosch. Everything's at the 7th-art.com shop. Please, if you do enjoy these podcasts, then we'd welcome... I'm getting this from other people's podcasts, that in every single one they say, please review us, please share us.
Do that, okay.
And actually, I think we probably should do a bit more of that.
Do a bit of self-promotion.
So if anyone likes, just enjoys this kind of chat about a painting, and it's encouraged you to have a look at a painting and maybe picked up one or two things, and I'm sure there's plenty more that could be said, but do let other people know. Do maybe plop a review in. Have a look at the films that 7th-art.com have to offer. We have also made films about those other wonderful Dutch artists, Vermeer, of course, Rembrandt, another. And as I say, we're hoping to do a Bruegel, all being well.
Can't wait for that already, Phil.
And as far as Dutch artists are concerned, then don't forget, for those of you who missed Van Gogh, Poets and Lovers in the cinema, that's definitely one to download, stream, or buy the DVD of, because that's a cracking film. Thank you very much, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you for listening to the Painting of the Week podcast. For more information, please visit our website at 7th-art.com or contact us by emailing info@7th-art.com. See you next time.